My name is Leo Miller, and I live in Crestwood, Ohio, which is exactly as exciting as it sounds. It's one of those towns where the biggest news is when the high school football team almost makes it to the state semifinals, and the best place to hang out is the parking lot of the only decent grocery store. I'm 16 years old, and before all this happened, my life was pretty simple. I wasn't a jock, I wasn't a nerd, I was just there. My passion, the thing that really got me going, was drawing. I filled sketchbook after sketchbook with characters and worlds, stories of heroes and monsters. I dreamed of one day creating my own graphic novel. In my world of ink and paper, I was in control. The heroes always had a plan, and the villains were always brought to justice in some clever, satisfying way. In real life, things were a lot messier. At Crestwood High, you had your cliques, just like any school. And at the top of the food chain was a guy named Tyree Jones. Tyree was built like a refrigerator, a solid 280 pounds of muscle that had once been destined for a football scholarship. A nasty knee injury his sophomore year had ended that dream, and since then, he'd channeled all his frustrated energy into being the king of the hallways. He wasn't just big. He had this aura of bitter anger around him that made most people give him a wide berth. We used to be friendly, back in middle school. We'd sit together at lunch sometimes and talk about video games, but high school changed him. He got big, he got popular with the wrong crowd, and I became just another face in the crowd to him. The problem started on a Tuesday afternoon in late November. The sky was that classic Ohio gray, and the air had a bite to it that promised snow was on the way. School had just let out, and I was heading to the bathroom before meeting my older brother Alex for a ride home. As I pushed the heavy door open, I saw him, Tyree. He wasn't alone. His two shadows, Mark and Kevin, were with him, leaning against the grimy tiled wall. I tried to just ignore them to mind my own business, but Tyree stepped in front of the stall I was heading for. Well, look what we have here," he said, his voice a low rumble. "It's Leo the artist." He said artist like it was a dirty word. I tried to play it cool. "Hey, Tyree, just need to use the restroom." He smirked, a slow, ugly thing. "I saw you talking to Sarah by the lockers today," he said. My stomach tightened. Sarah was in my English class, and yeah, we had been talking. We were partners on a project about the Great Gatsby. It was nothing. "Yeah, we have a project together," I said, trying to keep my voice even. Tyree took a step closer. The smell of cheap cologne and something sour like stale sweat filled the air. "You think you can just move in on my girl, Miller?" he growled. His girl. Sarah had never, to my knowledge, even looked in Tyree's direction. This was all in his head. "I don't know what you're talking about," I said, my heart starting to pound against my ribs. "We were just talking about the book." Mark and Kevin started snickering behind him. Tyree's eyes narrowed. "You think I'm stupid?" he asked, his voice getting louder. And that's when it happened. He shoved me hard. I stumbled back, my backpack throwing me off balance. I hit the wall with a thud. My first instinct was pure panic. My mind was screaming, "Run, get out of here." But my legs felt like they were made of lead. He came at me again, and this time I put my hands up, a pathetic attempt to defend myself. It was useless. He was too big, too strong, too fast. He grabbed the front of my jacket and just threw me. It felt like I was flying for a second before I crashed onto the cold, wet floor. The impact knocked the wind out of me. I gasped for air, my head spinning. I looked up and saw the worst thing imaginable. Kevin was holding up his phone, recording the whole thing. A sick, triumphant grin was plastered on his face. Tyree loomed over me, a mountain of flesh and fury. "You're nothing," he spat. He got on top of me, his knee digging into my chest, pinning me to the floor. I felt completely helpless. I tried to grab his leg to push him off, but it was like trying to move a boulder. He was just too massive. After what felt like an eternity, he got off me. He looked down, satisfied with his work. "Let that be a lesson," he said. Then he, Mark, and Kevin walked out laughing. I lay there on the disgusting bathroom floor for a moment, the sound of their laughter echoing in my ears. I slowly pushed myself up. My body ached, but the real pain was in my chest, a deep, burning humiliation. I grabbed my backpack, straightened my clothes, and walked out of the school, avoiding everyone's eyes. I felt like the smallest person in the world. The next day was a living nightmare. By the time I walked through the school doors, the video was already everywhere. It was like a virus. I could see it on people's phones as I walked down the hall. I could hear the whispers, the snickers. Someone had nicknamed me Bathroom Brawler, which was ironic since I hadn't landed a single punch. Tyree was a hero. He strutted through the halls like he'd won a championship. He'd retell the story to anyone who would listen, each telling more exaggerated than the last. He'd see me in the hallway and make a big show of it. "Hey, Leo, watch your step. The floor can be slippery," he'd yell, and his friends would erupt in laughter. I tried to just disappear. I ate lunch in the library. I took the long way to my classes to avoid the main hallways. I thought if I just ignored it, it would go away, but it didn't. It got worse. The video was my shadow, following me everywhere. My friends tried to be supportive, but they didn't know what to say. They pat me on the back and say, "Don't worry about it," but their pity was almost as bad as the taunts. Even Sarah, the girl this was all supposedly about, looked at me with this sad expression. She tried to talk to me after English class, but I just mumbled an excuse and walked away. I couldn't stand the look in her eyes. I felt weak, and I knew she saw it too. My brother, Alex, knew something was wrong. He's 3 years older than me, already graduated and working at a garage. He's usually pretty laid back, but he could read me like a book. "What's going on with you, man?" he asked me one night when he found me just staring at a blank page in my sketchbook. I couldn't even draw. The heroes in my head felt like a joke. I broke down and told him everything. I showed him the video. I watched his face tighten as he saw Tyree throw me to the ground. His first reaction was anger. "I'll go down to that school and handle this punk myself," he said, his fists clenched. "No," I said quickly, "that'll just make it worse. I'll be the kid whose older brother had to fight his battles," he sighed, running a hand through his hair. "All right, then you have to tell the principal. This is bullying, Leo. They have to do something." The thought of going to Principal Thompson's office made my stomach churn. Thompson was a man who cared more about paperwork and attendance records than the actual students. He'd probably give Tyree a slap on the wrist, a detention maybe, and then I'd be labeled a snitch. Tyree would just find another way to make my life hell, probably somewhere a camera couldn't see. "It won't work, Alex. It'll just make me look weaker." My brother didn't have an answer for that. The days crawled by, each one a new layer of misery. I started faking sick just to avoid school. My grades started to slip. My parents were worried, but I couldn't bring myself to tell them the full story. "How do you explain to your dad that you got beaten up in a bathroom and now the entire school thinks you're a joke?" I felt trapped, cornered. The world I had built for myself, my quiet life of drawing and dreaming, had been shattered. The lowest point came about a week after the fight. I was in the cafeteria, trying to be invisible, when Tyree and his crew sat down at the table right next to mine. They were loud, obnoxious, and Tyree was holding court, laughing about the video again. I tried to block it out, focusing on the terrible mystery meat on my tray. Then I heard him say my name. "Yeah, little Leo Miller. He just laid there on the floor like a starfish, didn't even try to fight back." I felt every eye in that section of the cafeteria turn towards me. My face burned hot with shame. I felt 1,000 pounds of pressure pushing me down into my seat. I stood up, my tray clattering against the table. I had to get out of there. As I walked away, I heard Tyree call out, "Running away again, Miller, that's all you know how to do." Laughter followed me out of the cafeteria and all the way down the hall. I hid in an empty classroom until the bell rang, my body trembling with a mixture of shame and a white-hot rage I had never felt before. That night, I sat in my room, staring at my own reflection in the dark window. I didn't recognize the person looking back at me. His eyes were hollow, his shoulders slumped. This wasn't me. The old Leo, the quiet artist who avoided conflict, was gone. He had been beaten and humiliated on a dirty bathroom floor. In his place was someone else, someone I didn't know yet. And in that moment, I knew what I had to do. Avoidance hadn't worked. Ignoring it hadn't worked. Hiding hadn't worked. The school wouldn't help me, and I couldn't let my brother fight for me. There was only one path left. I couldn't outmuscle Tyree. I couldn't beat him in a fair fight. But my graphic novels had taught me something. The hero doesn't always win because he's the strongest. He wins because he's the smartest. He uses the villain's own weaknesses against him. And Tyree's biggest weakness was his pride, his ego. He needed to be the tough guy, the king. I could use that. A plan started to form in my mind, a dark and risky one. It was a long shot, but it was the only shot I had. The next day at school, something in me had shifted. I walked with a purpose I hadn't felt in weeks. I didn't hide. When I saw Tyree in the hall, I didn't look away. I looked right at him. This confused him. He was used to me cowering. I let him talk his trash all day. I let him get his laughs. I absorbed it all, letting it fuel the cold fire that was burning inside me. I was just waiting for the right moment. The moment came during 7th period, our last class of the day. As the final bell rang, sending students flooding into the hallways, I saw Tyree packing up his bag. This was it. My heart was a drum solo in my chest, but on the outside I was calm. I walked over to his desk. His friends, Mark and Kevin, were standing there waiting for him. I ignored them. I looked right at Tyree. "Let's go run it again," I said, my voice low and steady. It was the same phrase he'd heard in 100 movies, the challenge of a rematch. Tyree looked at me, then at his friends, a slow, arrogant smile spreading across his face. He couldn't believe his luck. He was going to get to humiliate me all over again. It was too good for him to pass up. "You serious, Miller?" he chuckled. "You want another beatdown?" "Right now," I said, my eyes locked on his. "In the bathroom. No phones this time, just you and me." His ego swelled. The chance to prove his dominance one-on-one was irresistible. "You got it," he said, puffing out his chest. "Let's go." He told Mark and Kevin to wait for him, that this wouldn't take long. We walked to the same bathroom, the same grimy tiles, the same sour smell. It felt like walking onto a stage for the final act of a play. My whole body was screaming with adrenaline. My palms were sweaty, but I kept my hands shoved in my pockets so he couldn't see them shake. We went inside. The place was empty. "All right," Tyree said, cracking his knuckles. "Let's do this." But then he paused. "Hang on," he said. "I gotta take a piss first." It was exactly what I had hoped for. He turned his back on me and walked over to the urinal. This was the most critical part of my plan. I had to wait. I leaned against the sink, my heart hammering so hard I thought he must be able to hear it. I watched his reflection in the cracked mirror. He finished up and turned to the sink right next to me to wash his hands. He was completely relaxed, humming some stupid rap song under his breath. He was so sure of himself, so certain of what was about to happen. He thought he was in total control. He was wrong. He finished washing his hands, shook the water off, and turned away from the sink. His body was sideways to me, his head turning to face me, a cocky smirk already forming on his lips. That was my moment. That was the window. All my fear, all my humiliation, all the rage I had swallowed for weeks, it all exploded out of me in one single, focused burst. Before he could even register what was happening, I swung. My right fist connected with his jaw with a sickening crack. It wasn't a movie punch, it was ugly and real. My knuckles screamed in protest, but the jolt of impact shot up my arm like electricity. His head snapped to the side, the smirk wiped from his face, replaced by a look of pure shock. He stumbled, dazed. I didn't give him a second to recover. I hit him again with my left, a hard, driving punch right on the same spot. His eyes rolled back in his head for a second. I didn't stop. I rushed him, throwing a wild flurry of punches. They weren't skilled or pretty, they were desperate and furious. I hit his face, his shoulder, his chest, anything I could connect with. I was a machine built of pure anger. He was bigger and stronger, but my surprise attack had completely disoriented him. He stumbled backward, tripping over his own feet, and fell hard, landing on one knee. He was on the ground, holding his face with both hands. I stopped punching. I stood over him, panting, my own fists throbbing with pain. Blood was starting to gush from his nose, dripping through his fingers and onto the dirty floor. He looked up at me, his eyes wide with fear and confusion. The king was dethroned. The monster was just a bleeding kid on his knees. I leaned down, my face close to his. "This is what happens when you mess with me," I said, my voice a low, vicious snarl I didn't recognize as my own. "You stupid fool, don't ever do that stuff again." Blood was pouring from his nose now, a steady stream of dark red. He didn't say anything. He just knelt there, broken. A wave of adrenaline, hotter and more powerful than anything I'd ever felt, washed over me. I had done it. I had won. But then another feeling hit me. Fear. I was in a school bathroom with a guy I had just assaulted. Security could be here any second. I turned and ran. I burst out of the bathroom door and didn't slow down. I sprinted down the empty hallway, my footsteps echoing off the lockers. I pushed through the main doors of the school and into the cold afternoon air. I saw Alex's old, beat-up car waiting by the curb. He was supposed to pick me up 20 minutes ago. I yanked the passenger door open and jumped in, slamming it shut. "Go!" I yelled out of breath. "Just go!" Alex looked at me, saw the wild look in my eyes, the scraped knuckles on my right hand, and didn't ask any questions. He just hit the gas. As we pulled away from the school, I looked out the window, and I saw him, Tyree. He was standing outside the main entrance, leaning against a railing. He wasn't with his friends. He was alone. He was still holding his face, a wad of paper towels pressed to his nose. He looked small, defeated. I leaned back in my seat, my heart still pounding, but for a different reason now. It wasn't fear, it was victory. A smile spread across my face. I went home that day feeling like a new person. I felt powerful. I felt in control. In the weeks that followed, Crestwood High was a different place for me. The whispers didn't stop, but their tone changed. I wasn't bathroom Brawler, the victim, anymore. I was the quiet kid who had snapped. I was the guy who put Tyree Jones on his knees. No one messed with me. They didn't have to like me, but they respected me, or maybe they feared me. Either way, they left me alone. Tyree and I never spoke again. When we passed in the halls, he wouldn't meet my eyes. He just looked away, his face a blank mask. His reign was over. He was just another guy in the crowd now, a fallen king with a slightly crooked nose. The fear and shame that had haunted me were gone, replaced by a quiet confidence I'd never had before. I started drawing again, but my characters were different. They were more complex. The heroes had a darker edge, and the villains were sometimes just broken people. I was changing, and my art was changing with me. I even started talking to Sarah again. She'd heard the rumors, of course. She looked at me differently, with a kind of curiosity, but not pity. We finished our project and got an A. Life wasn't perfect, but it was mine again. I was back in control. I thought that was the end of the story. The villain was vanquished, the hero found his strength, and things went back to a new kind of normal. I was wrong. About a month later, I was in my room sketching when my phone buzzed. It was a message from an unknown number. I almost deleted it, thinking it was spam, but something made me open it. There was no text at first, just a video file attached. I felt a cold knot form in my stomach as I pressed play. The video was grainy, black and white, and silent. It was security camera footage. The timestamp in the corner was from the day of the second fight. The camera was aimed down the hallway right outside the bathroom. I watched as the video version of me and Tyree walked into the bathroom together. A few minutes passed. Then I saw myself burst out of the door, running like my life depended on it. The camera stayed on the empty hallway for another 30 seconds before Tyree stumbled out, holding his bloody face. My blood ran cold. Who had this? How did they get it? Then a second message came through from the same number. It was just a few words, but they hit me harder than any punch Tyree had ever thrown. The message said, "I know what you did. We need to talk."